Imagine waking up one morning to find your entire world literally split right down the middle. Families separated overnight. Friends suddenly unable to meet for a simple cup of coffee. A giant, imposing wall dividing an entire city, block by block, street by street. Well, welcome to this explainer. Today, we're tracing the absolutely unbelievable history of East and West Germany, from the ashes of a bitter division all the way to the triumph of reunification.
So why was a nation divided? It's a question that honestly almost sounds like science fiction today. How could such a dramatic physical split of a major nation actually happen? How do you take a unified country and just tear it in two? We're going to explore exactly why the infamous Berlin Wall was built in the first place and the incredible, almost accidental story of how one of history's most famous divisions finally came crashing down. 45. That is a stark number, because for nearly 45 years, Germany was split into two completely different nations. And this wasn't just some political boundary drawn on a map in a boardroom. These were two entirely separate realities coexisting side by side. On one side of the line, you had a democratic system. On the exact opposite side, a communist state. An entire generation grew up knowing absolutely nothing but a divided homeland.
Okay, let's dive into this. Section 1. Out of the ruins.
Picture this. It's May 1945. Nazi Germany has surrendered, leaving a nation in absolute ruins. Millions are dead, entire cities are reduced to literal rubble, and the economy has totally collapsed. To manage this shattered country, the victorious Allied powers, that's the United States, the UK, France, and the Soviet Union, came to an agreement to divide Germany into 4 distinct occupation zones. And notably, the capital city, Berlin, was also carved up into 4 sectors, even though it was located deep, deep inside the Soviet-controlled zone. Now, at first, everyone agreed this division was just meant to be temporary, but very quickly, tensions between the Western Allies and the Soviet Union began to simmer. The stage for the Cold War was officially being set.
Which brings us to Section 2, a nation split in two. Now, what's really interesting here is how fast those temporary zones hardened into permanent borders. By 1949, the Western zones united to form the Federal Republic of Germany, which we know as West Germany, with its capital in Bonn. They adopted democracy and a free market economy with heavy U.S. support, and they rapidly recovered. On the flip side, the Soviet zone became the German Democratic Republic, or East Germany. Despite having democratic right there in the name, it was a communist state where the government strictly controlled the media, the economy, education, pretty much every single aspect of daily life. These two Germanys immediately became the ultimate, glaring symbols of the Cold War.
And that sets the stage for Section 3, the Berlin Wall rises.
Throughout the 1950s, millions of East Germans were fleeing that strict government control, heading straight for the booming economy of the West. This mass exodus was literally threatening to destabilize the entire East German state, so they took drastic action. 13 August 1961. Overnight, literally under the cover of darkness, barbed wire was rapidly unrolled right across the city, tearing streets in half and instantly trapping citizens on whichever side they just so happened to be sleeping on.
And that initial barbed wire didn't stay just barbed wire for long. It quickly evolved into a highly lethal, militarized border. We're talking about a massive concrete barrier that completely encircled West Berlin. They added hundreds of watchtowers. They brought in guard dogs. They stationed armed soldiers with shoot-to-kill orders. Anyone attempting to escape risked immediate imprisonment or death. Families were separated overnight, and tragically, some wouldn't see each other again for decades.
So, what was the human cost? Let's look at Section 4, Life Across the Divide. You have to wonder what it was actually like to live under these systems on a day-to-day basis. Life in West Germany wasn't some perfect utopia, but citizens there enjoyed free speech, free elections, and the absolute freedom to travel wherever they wanted. Their economy roared back to become one of the strongest in Europe. East Germany, however, remained under suffocating control. They faced severe shortages and kept their citizens effectively locked within their own borders.
And then enter the Stasi. This was the notorious East German secret police, and they monitored millions of their own citizens. To put this staggering scale of this surveillance into perspective, historians estimate that there was roughly 1 informant for every 63 people in East Germany. Think about that for a second. They created this deeply paranoid environment where neighbors informed on neighbors, and sometimes even family members turned on one another. It was a psychological wall that was just as real as the concrete one, completely eroding trust even among the closest of friends.
But, and this is the crucial point, despite the terrifying surveillance and the armed guards, the human desire for freedom just couldn't be extinguished. East Germans engineered elaborate underground tunnels right beneath the death strip. Some even built homemade hot air balloons to literally float over the border in the dead of night. It was an astonishing, desperate display of courage, though many tragically paid with their lives during these attempts.
Moving into the late 80s now, we arrive at Section 5, the fall and reunification.
By the late 1980s, peaceful protests were sweeping across a weakening Eastern Europe, basically turning East Germany into a giant pressure cooker. And it all boiled over thanks to an incredible mistake. This brilliantly illustrates how history can pivot on a total accident. On the evening of 9 November 1989, an East German official, during a live television press conference, got his notes mixed up. He mistakenly announced that all travel restrictions to the West would be lifted. When a reporter asked when this would take effect, he famously stammered, "Immediately, without delay."
The reaction to that slip-up was absolutely instantaneous. Thousands of East Berliners rushed straight to the heavily fortified wall. The border guards were completely overwhelmed, and having received no official orders to shoot, they finally relented and just opened the checkpoints. For the first time in nearly 30 years, people crossed freely. The scenes were purely euphoric. Strangers hugged and celebrated together. People climbed on top of the concrete and literally began breaking it apart with hammers and chisels. The wall had fallen.
The momentum of that single night was completely unstoppable. Less than a year later, on 3 October 1990, East and West Germany officially ceased to exist as separate entities. Germany was finally reunited as one democratic nation.
But it's really important that we look at the facts here impartially. Reunification was absolutely not a simple overnight fairy tale ending. Stitching two vastly different systems back together proved incredibly difficult. The East German economy severely lagged behind the West. Once exposed to free market competition, many Eastern factories simply had to close, leading to soaring unemployment. The newly unified government had to invest billions upon billions of euros to modernize the eastern regions, and the truth is, even today, certain economic and social differences still linger.
So, just to put this entire 45-year journey into perspective for a second, we go from a nation in ruins in 1945 to the birth of two distinct states in 49. Then, the shocking rise of the wall in 61, its miraculous fall in 89, and finally a complex but triumphant reunification in 1990.
If there is one core takeaway to distill from this entire era, it's exactly this. Walls can divide people, but they cannot destroy the human desire for freedom. For 45 years, politics and ideology created an immense physical and psychological barrier. But ultimately, hope and the pure drive for self-determination proved far, far stronger than concrete and barbed wire.
Which leaves us with a final thought to ponder today. We've seen that even the most formidable, heavily armed barriers in modern history can eventually be dismantled by peaceful change. So, looking at the world today, what seemingly permanent divisions will we overcome next? It's a question definitely worth asking. If you found this explainer helpful and want to dive into more structured breakdowns of history, politics, and true stories, please make sure to like this, share it with a fellow focused learner, and subscribe. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you in the next explainer.